Danae
and Kiveli,
and today is another discussion video. This time I chose the topic. What I wanted to ask you is, what are your ways to handle fear? And fear is very broad, of course. It's something that, you know, as pianists, we have to deal with, anxiety, nerves. So what are your ways to deal with it? How do you control it and overcome it?
I think that the basis of this is that we're only afraid of things that we don't know. So the only thing that we're afraid of is the unknown. We're afraid of spiders because we don't know which spiders might be poisonous and might bite us. We're afraid of snakes. We're not afraid of fluffy rabbits because we're not aware of how they could, for example, hurt us, possibly because they can't hurt us. So I think we're afraid of the unknown. That's the basis of it all, which means that if I'm afraid of something irrational, my first thing is to inform myself, to try to get as much information about it as possible, so as to take my fear away from it, because then I know what I'm confronted with, I know what to expect. The other thing, which pertains more to like fear of a situation that like there's a legitimate reason to be afraid of it. Like for example, there is a legitimate to be anxious on stage, because if you mess up, then you know you might feel embarrassed, which I don't think you have to feel embarrassed. Which actually brings me to the second way I deal with fear, which is to really ask myself, why am I afraid of this? Like, is there an actual good reason to be embarrassed? Or does that not make me a, say, worse human being to mess up on stage? You know, it's nothing to be ashamed of, it's human. So to sort of like really reflect upon the reason of my fear and whether, you know, it's something worth being afraid of or something where you're like, no, actually you can even take strength out of the fact that you have the courage to put yourself into that situation.
Yeah, I definitely love your first point. I completely agree with that. Fear of the unknown. I watched this movie a couple of years ago called, I forgot what it's called. Is it?
I know which one you mean. The skyscraper, the guy, what's his name? Le Petit?
It's called,
I know totally what you mean.
Walk the Line? We can blend in the title here right now. And it's a movie about a person walking the tightrope, and he put his tightrope between the two World Trade Centers, and that's an actual true story. And his name is something with Petit.
I think it's Le Petit.
Le Petit, something like this. Yeah, it's a French acrobat basically. And he said he was going to put his tightrope between the two World Trade Centers and walk without having any safety belt on. And he actually did that and succeeded, and of course it was completely illegal and everything, but he became very famous. And he gave us some kind of lecture once, and I just saw a video of it where he said exactly that, what you said, that being afraid of something is not knowing something. And what you said, the example with the spider, is if you study the spider and then you learn about it and understand, okay, when does it bite, for example, or how dangerous is it, actually you're going to be less afraid because you understand it better. And I think if we transport that to our situation playing on stage, I think it's also a big part is this understanding it better, because as you say, it's kind of a rational fear, you know, okay, I might mess up on stage, but if I understand the situation better, as in like, okay, if I play the wrong note, what can I do? What are my options?
Exactly. Yes.
Then I can handle it better. And for us also, I mean, with more experience comes maybe not less fear, but more understanding of the fear, and therefore handling it.
And more
better.
Capability to control it and to be in control of it rather than letting it control you.
Connecting to that, we always say conquer your fears, right? Do you think that fear can actually be conquered, or is it more just, it's not going to go away, you cannot make it go away, but just handled? So maybe conquering means handling it. So do you think fear goes away, or is it just learning to deal with it?
First of all, I would like to say that another thing that helped me when thinking about it is that we always think of fear as an inherently negative thing, which, if we think about it from an evolutionary perspective, fear is necessary for survival. For example, millions of years ago, thousands, and we were in the jungle and we would listen to a noise that we didn't know, we would be afraid of it because in 9 out of 10 cases it was the wind, but one of these cases it was the lion that could eat you. And that's why we were afraid all 10 times to avoid being eaten, which is a good thing. So fear inherently is not a negative thing. That's the first thing that I would say to that. Now, in terms of being able to conquer it, I think that living life without fear is an unnatural thing, and therefore I wouldn't say that that is a goal to have. So therefore, I think that the important sort of twist of perspective is viewing your fear as an opportunity to be courageous.
And also to grow.
Or an opportunity to inform yourself on something.
Yeah.
So not have the goal to not have fear at all, but have the goal to be able to maybe rationalize your fears and use it as a potential to grow.
Yeah, and I also think, as you said, fear is actually necessary for survival. Maybe not so much nowadays, although even nowadays, I mean, the fear, for example, of being hit by the train stops you from standing on the tracks or something like that. But it's also interesting to maybe understand the evolutionary aspect. You just mentioned the fear of, for example, being eaten by an animal. I don't know if it's 100% true, but I've heard this several times, and I think it's very interesting because we pianists often talk about having cold hands before we go on stage because we're afraid.
Yes.
And I've heard very often, but yeah, if there's any scientific person here that can tell me if it's actually true, let me know, that apparently we get cold fingers because our body is programmed in a way that when we are scared, when our heart rate goes up, our blood focuses on our organs and it goes to the heart and it leaves the limbs, so that if the bear bites, for example, there's not so much blood in here. So that the blood doesn't gush out, and rather it's at the important bits, the heart, the organs, and it increases our chances of survival. This is why we have cold feet and cold hands, and this is why also the expression is cold feet. Only that, of course, cold hands for a pianist is the worst thing you can have. But I think it's very interesting to understand this rationalization because so much happens in the mind. I mean, you know, I believe in the power of the mind above everything else. And I think that if me, before a performance, having cold hands, if I think, okay, there is no bear that's going to eat me right now, you know, so maybe this can somehow influence my bodily reaction and make the hands be not that cold. And if I've heard musicians say, you know, they visualize whatever sparks going through their body, warming it up. So kind of countering that with rational thoughts and knowledge.
Yeah, for me, especially to like the point of fear due to performance, like stage fright, that thing. One thing that I have found so important for me is that if I think about it, the unknown aspect of performing on stage, because I mean, we've performed on stage many times, stages many times, and nevertheless, each new stage seems sometimes as daunting as the one before. So the actually unknown aspect within that equation is the audience. So what I have found for myself is if I find myself feeling a bit closer to the audience, that takes away a lot of my like sort of irrational fear. That's why I found that talking to the audience before playing, sort of looking some of them in the eye, there is this person, she or he's going to listen to my performance now. The other thing is, even before I've seen them, is not picturing them as this like critical body of the enemy, like I'm going to go there and have to impress them, like, because that is a natural thought to have, but more like these people are there to really enjoy this moment with me and share in the joy of music. And to sort of see them as like a positive, supportive, energetic body in that way. And that is something I remember was a key change of perspective in my sort of quest away from more, you know, stage fright towards enjoying it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think another one that you also kind of mentioned already, but I think that also helps a lot, is this embracing your fear. So not just, okay, it's there, you know, trying to handle it, but actually in a way being grateful that it is there, because fear can actually push you. And I don't mean in the sense that, okay, you practice more, you prepare more, but actually fear gives you more adrenaline and makes you perform better. So I think embracing the feeling and, you know, feeling it, okay, my heart rate is up a little bit, and I'm going to use that and transform it into something positive. Of course, this only is possible if you already know how to handle it, and, you know, not let it overwhelm you. But I think using this is very powerful and helpful. And coming back to this movie with this person, this tightrope walker, he also said, of course you are afraid. Many people asked him, weren't you afraid when you walked on that tightrope between the World Trade Centers? And he said, of course I was afraid. If I hadn't been afraid, I would have fallen down. And that is very interesting because he said the only reason why I survived this is because I was afraid, and that made me focus.
And to that exact point, I think that many times we make the mistake to say that fear equals panic, which it doesn't have to. Panic is a different thing than fear. And panic is unadvisable, while fear can be a boost.
Yes, and I think maybe we should start to shift our mind to thinking fear is actually positive, not have this negative stamp on fear. And also, you know how we say oh, he's afraid, or he's not afraid, he's so cool. Just be actually people that are afraid, and fear is something positive. People that can use it to their advantage.
And I think that another thing that I found with this aspect of fear, anxiety, and performance, or if you substitute performance to just like doing this thing that you are afraid of or facing it, is that of course it can go terribly bad and you can just, you know, panic can overwhelm you. But if like all the components come together and you do the thing you are afraid of and you succeed in doing it, you succeed in facing it, on the other side of that I think is incredible exhilaration and this feeling of being alive and ecstasy and everything, which I think we've both felt on stage before.
Absolutely.
And of course that is an emotion that is unreachable unless you go through the challenge first.
And I think if we think about what we were afraid of as young kids, that's also very interesting, because as we grow up and understand what those things mean, some of that fear goes away. For example, a very classic one is being afraid of the dark, because we don't know what happens in the dark. What is it? Is the monster going to come? Is the whatever bad guy going to come and get you? And as you grow up, you understand that the light switch turns the light off, but the room stays the same.
Yeah.
And you're not afraid of that anymore.
Yeah.
And I think as we grow up, we have similar irrational fears on a different level, and we should maybe try to conquer them in the same way as we did our childhood fears.
And of course, nothing can heal you from like an irrational fear as time. I think that time is the key factor to everything that is irrational and something that we can't control. I think that the main thing is give yourself time to actually understand that this thing is not as scary as it seems at the beginning.
We really hope that you enjoyed this video, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye!
Bye!